this is Jenny with Gogh Art Crate, and today I have a really fun art project for you. We're going to be doing this really cool wooden star project. These are big, they're like 10 inches this way, 10 inches this way, and they are lightweight enough that they can actually hang on a tree if you like that look, or you can hang it like with a suction cup hook on a window, put it on your fireplace mantle, hang it in your bedroom, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to guide you through how to paint it. The rest is up to you. This project was put out on YouTube for Fossil Distance Learning Program, grades 4 through 8, but really it's easy enough anyone can enjoy it, whether you're young or older. And but I will refer to the brushes that I sent them and the paint I sent them. This kit is available on our website, gobox.com. You can buy it for yourself if you like, or just watch. It's kind of fun to watch art too. So this is what the wooden star looks like. And luckily it has this nice hook affixed to the back already. And I think if you don't want that, you could, it looks like it's maybe just glued on. You could probably take that off. And then paint-wise, we are using black and white, and then the three primary colors. So blue, red, and yellow. I mean, you can see that the amount of paint I put on here, we don't use very much red at all. We use it to do the scarf and then the carrot nose, and the orange, I mean the yellow is only used for the carrot nose, unless you want to do, well actually we mix a green too. But if you want to change this up, if you want to do a green scarf, you can do that. You can do a pink scarf, you can do whatever color you want. But let's go ahead and get started. So have a look at your brushes. It's a 10-pack. A lot of these we won't use, but we will use a few of them, at least 4 of them. I like to start with this big flat brush, but you could also start with this big one is about the same width, but it's kind of got rounded corners. And just have a look at these. We've got some flat, medium-sized brushes, and then we've got some little round brushes. So I will refer to those as we use them. But let's pick up this largest brush first. Go ahead and dip it in your water cup and just kind of push it gently across the bottom of the cup. So yes, you will want a cup of water and a paper towel. So just brush it lightly across the bottom of the cup just to wake up those bristles, soften them up, because they do come with a special coating on them that keeps them in shape as they ship. Okay, let's dry that off. Make sure you dry this metal part off too. Now you can see the brush is a lot more flexible, which we want. We want a bendy brush. So let's go ahead and mix our blue color that we used for the sky, and then we'll do the snow after that. So I actually just mixed blue and white, but it's more blue than white, because I wanted it to look like it was a night sky because we have this nice bright moon out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape off a little white and plop it down somewhere. You guys have your little round palette in your kit, and you can use one of the little scooped out wells in there for mixing. And I'm going to mix some blue in there. I didn't have the right palette here at home. I forgot to grab one from our shipping space. So I'm just going to make do with my flat palette, but that actually helps you see the colors a little better too, because I can spread them out more. Okay, let's just start at the top. Be careful around this little twine rope. In fact, you can fold it under if you want, although it probably will try to peek out. It really wants to be the star of the show today, I guess. And my brush strokes are just kind of all different directions. I'm just painting this top triangle. The paint goes on the wood really nicely. I do love that. Now, as I get down in here where the moon is going to go, I'm going to show you something different I'm going to do. So just keep going down, heading towards the middle of the star here. You can head out this way. And then my brush is running out of paint, which I want it to do, so make sure yours is running out of paint too. Just spread that paint out till it starts running out. While this is still wet, I'm going to take my brush and I'll just use the corner of it and pick up a little bit of white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this on here in the area where the moon goes, and I'm mixing it right on this wood project. So I want this to just be a pale blue area. So what this is not the moon. This is the glow in the sky from the moon. So we know the moon, with the sun shining off the moon, it puts off a lot of light, and it a lot of times is a big circle around the moon. And if your paint's drying and your brush is dragging and it's not blending in super great, just go back to your blue color. You don't even have to wash your brush. And just brush some fresh bit of blue on there. So you have wet paint to work with. Then go back to your white. Having the paint really wet while you do this is helpful. But as you may notice, the paint dries really fast on the wood. So we gotta work a little quickly here. And I'm just kind of looking for kind of a rounded area. You don't have to paint a circle. You can just have it be like a big halo. And it's pretty subtle. You can see it on here. That's about all I need. I mean, I could keep going and lightening it up more, but there's really no need to do that. So I'm going to just keep continuing on with my sky. Now, one thing that's kind of cool here is you can alternate your brush. So you can dip it in dark blue if you want and get some dark blue on there. And then you could dip it in some white and get a little white on there. So you're kind of basically mixing it on the wood project. What that does, if you want to do it, it's totally optional. What it will do though is it will add a little more character to your sky. So if you look at the night sky, sometimes you have dark patches and you have light patches where maybe there's a little wispy cloud. Maybe I ended up with a little too much white on there. If you have that problem, just dip your brush in blue. Whenever I'm painting skies, I like to do a mix of the color family I'm working with and make it kind of splotchy. It does make it a little more interesting to look at than just flat blue. So I'm going to bring all this paint right into these little rounded corners. When you're finished with this project, you can paint around the edges if you want. Like there's a really thin, like 1/8 inch edge to this. And if you want to paint around that later on, you can. You just bring whatever color you're working on. So I would bring my blue from the sky around, and then as I get down in here, I'd bring the white from the snow around. Or you can paint it all one solid color, like red all the way around or dark blue all the way around. It's up to you. So even though the snow is white, it's actually a very pale blue. We're going to bring the sky color all the way down. We're going to fill in the whole star with that color. Because then when we paint the white over the top of it later on, you'll have a little bit of that bluish tint going through. And if you ever look at snow at night, it's never pure white. It's kind of bluish. Kind of picks up whatever colors are around it. But it's just got this kind of icy blue color at night. A lot of times, unless it's directly under like a orangey street light, an orange tone street light, then it's going to pick up that color. Well, I don't know if any of you guys have had snowfall yet where you live. We had a tiny dusting a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, where I live, but we don't get a ton, and I really would like a little bit of snow this year. It's so fun and so pretty, and everything just looks so cozy. But I know some of you guys live in areas where you have lots and lots of snow. Maybe you get sick of it, I don't know. Okay, just bringing this all the way down. Getting these edges. Now the little edges, sometimes you might have to go back later and put a second coat of paint on an area because maybe the texture of the wood didn't allow the paint to absorb all the way. I'll have to show you guys, when I was designing the projects, I always like to think of fun things I can turn shapes into that are like not expected. So one of the things I did, which I thought would be really fun, but it ended up being a little too involved, was this. I turned it into like a gnome. But I thought it was really funny to take that star and be like, what could I turn that into? So you can do that too. You can think of ideas that you can turn shapes into, get your creative brain going. So now I have that little one to put in my house somewhere. Okay, so there we go. I've got the background started, and my sky's a little choppy, which means I have brush strokes in different tones, so lighter colors and darker colors of the blue and white going through there, which I like. And now I'm going to just loosely wash my brush. When I say loosely, it means we don't have to get every single last bit of blue off. So then I'll dab it on the paper towel. And I'm going to pick up some white. Let's create our snowbank. So it just comes up right just maybe half an inch below this little corner here. And I like to make it sort of interesting. It is kind of on the flatter side because we have a tree to put in there. So I'm not going to do any big hills. But you can see because the blue underneath is still slightly wet, I'm getting that icy blue color that I want for snowfall at night. And just continue working, and let's just fill in the whole bottom. If your snow starts becoming too white, like maybe the blue is dried and it's not mixing enough, you can always mix a really pale blue. And you can have some lighter white patches in here because sometimes there's little hills that bump up and the moonlight will catch the top of those and it'll be a brighter white hill. Like right here, I could do a really bright white hill if I wanted to. Just kind of showing you ideas. To keep us from painting one solid tone throughout, because there's so many different variations you can do with the colors you're working with. You can do pale blue, you can do really white. We do put some shadows and things like that in here. Once we get the snowman on in the tree, there's a little shadow that goes behind each. But for now, let's just get this base light blue on there. Snow can be really streaky, so you can have some streaks of bright white in there. So many different things you can do. I used to have a hard time painting landscapes, like mountains and actual landforms, and I've gotten better over the years just from taking some classes from my business partner, who's actually my husband. He does landscapes really well, so I take his classes when he teaches online, and I paint along with him, and I've learned so much because his style's so different than mine, and I always think that's really good because it's good to experiment with other styles and learn them as much as you can. Okay. Gonna wash that brush, as you can see. And I'm gonna set this aside. We might actually be done with this brush. We'll keep it close just in case. But here's what we have so far. And I think what I'll have us do next is paint the moon on. Now, this is the moon is a circle, obviously, but we're having just a cut-off view of it because I kind of wanted it up in this corner just so the snowman could be looking up towards it and reaching his arms towards it. If you want, you can find something to trace, something circular. In fact, like the lid of one of your paint bottles would work good. You just want to make sure that you're probably, if you're going to take it off, this underside has a lot of paint in it, and you don't want to accidentally get paint on your project, so you could just use the top side of this if you want. I'm gonna freehand it. The moon on my original here is a little bit bigger than that paint lid. So I want to use one of my small round brushes, and look how many you have to choose from. Pick the one that you like the best. So I think I'm going to go with this one here. It looks like it has a little number 5 on it. And again, the bristles are really stiff from being brand new and having that special coating on them. So I'm going to really lightly brush it across the bottom of the cup. Anytime I'm using these small pointy brushes, I don't want to press down really hard because you can permanently fray your brush. And they make them small and pointy for a reason. It's for detail work, so we don't want it to be frayed right off the bat. They will eventually start fraying over time just from usage, but you can clean them really good and reshape the bristles every time you clean them, and that will help keep their shape. So you see how I'm reshaping those bristles? I washed the brush, or I got it damp, and then I just reshaped them into a point just by pinching it with my fingers. And I'm going to pick up a little white on the tip of the bristles. You can see not a ton. And then I'm going to like in your mind, pretend you're drawing a full circle, if that helps you visualize it. And I'll just start here, and just in my mind I'm going to make a full loop, but we know that we're going to run out of room. So if I were to keep going, go out there. So then I end up with kind of this C shape. And you can round it out. Like sometimes the side might end up kind of flat. You can just use the tip of your bristles and just kind of round out any areas that you don't like. And you can always paint that light blue color over the top and try again if it doesn't turn out exactly how you want it right off the bat. But I'm going to wash this brush now real carefully so I don't mess up those bristles. And now I'm going to pick up, I happen to like this little flat one, although this one has some bristles. If you end up with like little hairs sticking off the top, you can always use scissors really carefully and trim them. I am going to do that real quick. I'll just show you how I do it. I do this often if I end up with the occasional brush that comes in not so perfect. And I can see, you probably can't see them on camera, but I see them. They're just fine little threads of brush hair. These little scissors work perfect. So if you have like nail scissors, those are perfect. Okay, so I'm going to dip the brush in the water, brush it gently across the bottom, dry that off real good, and we're going to pick up white just a tiny bit. You don't need much at all. And starting from these edges, I'm going to start pulling inward from the edge. And what's happening here is I'm letting my brush run out of paint as I pull inward. And those areas, like especially right down here where your brush is running out of paint, those will have a little bluish tint to them, and that's kind of how I try to create craters in the moon. But I'm going to show you how to paint more craters on the moon itself rather than just leaving it be the background showing through, if that makes sense. I'll show you. So just pulling from the outside edges of the moon, working inward. So I have dark spots on here just from the background showing through in areas where my brush ran out of paint. And as we know, if we look at the moon, you see dark patches and bright patches, and the dark patches are impact areas where asteroids have slammed into the moon. And so yeah, there's a whole big trench, like a Grand Canyon on the moon, that is the largest area we see of darkness when we look at the moon. And so you could leave it like that if you want, but I'll show you how to, a lot of times it's, you end up with a really white moon and you've lost any of the dark spots. So I'm going to show you how to paint those right over the top. So I don't even wash my brush because this dries so fast. I'm going to pick up a little blue. You can see I picked up very little. And then I'll just dab it on in like a pattern. So pretend your brush is all of the little asteroids impacting the moon. That's kind of fun. You can even make noises. in your head. So then I end up with some cool dark spots that I've just sort of dabbed my brush to create those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash the brush. And when I do it this way, a lot of times I end up with the moon being too dark. So I'll come in with a little bit of white. See, picked up a little. And then I'll just dab in white spots in between, or even glaze over, a thin glaze of white over some of those spots that are too dark. And then you end up with a pretty cool looking moon. Took me a long time to learn how to paint the moon and get it right, and I feel like I do a fairly decent job with it now, but in the past it was something I needed to learn. I needed to work on it. So there we go. That's all we need to do. Let's wash the brush and dry it off. We'll set it aside. Let's go back to one of our round brushes. I'll just use that same one that I use, which is right here. It's a little number 5 on it. And I'm going to dip the brush in the white. It already had been washed, so it's flexible and damp, which is what I like. We're going to build a snowman. Yeah, we love to do that, don't we? So just like when you build a snowman, we're going to work from the ground up. So we've got this big snowball here, then a medium one, and then a small one. So this big one, you can see most of it's on the ground, but a little bit of it goes above the top of this horizon line. So I'm going to start over here. Going to come maybe half an inch above the horizon line, so right about there. And then I'll just round out and make a nice big round snowball. I tend to like to make mine kind of more of a slightly squished circles. If you think about it, the weight of each snowball is going to maybe squish the one on the bottom. There we go. And you could fill it in now, but I think I'll just have us go on and draw the next snowball. So they're not going to be sitting like directly on top. There's going to be a little bit of an overlap. So right about here, I'm going to come down. Just make a little, it's like you're drawing a little smile on the top here. He's wearing a little hat. And this is going to come up and make another snowball that's smaller than that one on the bottom. And they can be lumpy. If you've ever rolled a snowman, you know it's really hard to get them perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect for the painting. So right now what we have are 2 linked rings, which when we fill them all in with the white color, they come together really nice. And let's do that last one. So the last snowball is going to be smaller than this one. And I do the same thing. I just start with a little scoop here. We're drawing a little hat or smile shape. Come up and complete that circle. And there we go. He's a little taller than my last one. I can tell because I see quite a bit more space between here and here than that one, but I guess he's just a little more grand. He's the big boy. Okay, let's wash that brush. And how about, let's go back to that first brush we started with, because this is a good one for filling in the snowman. Now, if you have a really small snowman, you might pick a smaller brush to fill it in. Just go with what feels comfortable for you. And let's start with the bottom snowball. Just paint right over everything. So all of these little lines where the rings interchange, just paint right over them. And for a little while, you might see those rings. You might see through your coating of paint and see the drawing part where the rings sort of interacted. But we'll give the snowman a second coat of paint, which will help. We need to wait though, because acrylic paint needs to dry to a certain level before you put a second coat of paint on. Otherwise, it just sort of pushes that first wet coat of paint around and can be really frustrating. So if you just let it dry for a few minutes, you're good to go. And that's exactly what we're gonna do. We are gonna let it dry and we're gonna work on a tree. So let's wash this brush when you're ready. Take your time. What are we at? We're at about 25 minutes, so that's great. We'll be just fine time-wise. Okay, tree time. Fir trees are fun to paint once you learn them, and I'll show you how to do it. I did make this one kind of a dark army green color because it's at night, so it wouldn't be a real vivid green. And then we paint some snow over the top. So I'll show you how to make that green color, and let's talk about what brush we're gonna use. Oh boy. Okay, I think I like my trees a little bit better when I use one of these sort of medium-sized flat brushes. I think this is the one I used earlier that I trimmed. Yes, it is. I can feel it's still kind of damp. And we'll use the thin edge of this to get some of the parts of the tree, and I'll show you how to do it. But if you feel like you'd do a better tree using one of the small round brushes, then you can absolutely do that. But let's make our green color. So I'm gonna scrape off a little blue. And then you wanna use way less yellow than blue, because the yellow is going to really change this color immediately. So I'm using less yellow than blue. And right now I'm ending up with kind of a dark teal color. And the more yellow you add, the more it's gonna turn to green. I just don't like to add a lot of yellow right off the bat because you can end up with an avocado color right away. And we don't really want an avocado color for our tree. So I just gradually add more and more. And you could use this green right here if you want. It's a nice green. What I did on the original is I wanted kind of a muted dark green, so I added just the tiniest little bit of black. So I'll use the corner of my brush. The black is going to overpower this color right away. So just a little bit at a time. You can always add more. And what this does, it kind of mutes the color down. So it's more of a muted green, not so vivid. Kind of an evergreen color, I guess. I think I'm going to use this color. It's a little more rich than that one, but I really like it. And now I'm going to teach you how to draw a tree, a fir tree. So what I want to do first is draw the tree trunk, because that gives me something to attach the branches to. Sometimes when I've painted, I do just all the branches, all the foliage, all the like pine needles and stuff without drawing a trunk first. But I think if you're just starting out drawing trees, drawing the trunk first is helpful. So see how I've got the thin edge of the brush? Just use the thin edge of the brush and draw a line. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. It's going to come down right just below that snow horizon line. And if it's not showing up very good because the green is too close to the blue background, then you'll want to tweak your green color a little bit. I'm going to add just a little more black. Mine, it is showing up, but I feel like it will show up better, especially on camera, if I have it just a little darker. So there, I've got my tree trunk. Now, when you mix paint, you see how my brush is kind of blobbed out? You just end up with a lot of paint on your brush that you don't need, that will kind of throw you off when you're first painting. So I'm going to just wipe this off on my palette, or you can wipe it off on your paper towel. That's probably better for you guys because you've got the little round palettes. And then I've got hardly any paint on my brush. I'm going to re-dip the tip of the bristles. So there is paint on there. You just can't see very much because I want to start with a small amount. So if you've ever put up a Christmas tree in your house, you know there's that top spike that you put the star on. And I'm just going to dab my brush up and down and go up a little bit so I have that top spike there. And it really doesn't look much different than it did when I drew that line on there. But then you've also got these little short ones that go up like this. It actually looks a lot like a bird footprint when you're first starting a tree. So when I've taught in my studio, that's exactly what I've told the students. Make a bird footprint. And that's going to set our tree on how to get it together. And if you look at your tree at home, if you have a Christmas tree or just a tree outside, you'll see they do often, fir trees will often have that. Okay, so now I'm going to hold my brush horizontal and I'm going to go out to the side because these branches are all going to kind of go It's kind of outward and downward rather than these first ones that go upward. And then by tapping my brush, then I end up with kind of a furry look. And since they're fir trees, I figure that's okay. And you want to just keep going out. As you get closer to the ground, these branches are going to be a little bit wider and wider, so you end up with that kind of triangular shape. Now, fir trees, there's so many different varieties. There's really full fir trees that are big and bushy, and then there's other ones that are called like nobles, and they're like, my parents have a noble Christmas tree in their house, and the branches are kind of sparse, and you can see a lot of the trunk in between. Everybody, I guess, kind of has their own preference for what kind of tree they like. Then right down here at the bottom, I'm just gonna end the tree. We'll put some snow up against it, or actually when we put the snow on the tree itself, that will help tie it into the ground. And you can always adjust your tree. Just have a look at it. If it's maybe it needs to be wider down here, you can adjust that. When we put the snow on, it kind of thins the tree out a little bit. So right now, if it's really intense and big and bushy, when we put the snow on it, that's gonna help. Okay, got that out of the way. Let's wash our brush. We're gonna set this one aside. When you're ready, I'm gonna dry that off. Hopefully you guys are having fun. I know this is coming together nicely, but as my snowman has dried, I do see that the paint is too thin, the coating of paint, so we do want that second coat of white on there. So I'm gonna pick up my largest brush again. Make sure it's cleaned off if you've got blue or any other color on it. I guess a little blue would be okay, but you don't want any green or anything on it. And let's get this guy a second coat of paint. A second coat of snow. We're going to add some fun shading on this too. That will make our snowman look a little more three-dimensional. And if you need to use a smaller brush to get nice sharp edges, you can. Like I could pick up this one and get this small area. If you notice, I turned my star. A lot of times I'll do that because it makes it easier to reach certain areas. So feel free to do that whenever you need to. I'm gonna clean that brush off and set it aside. So the snowman is so pale that it looks out of place because we've got this nice shadowy snow landscape that's bluish, and the moon is not pure white, but having the snowman be pure white doesn't quite fit in. So that's why we're going to shade the snowman, and we're shading this back half because this is your light source. It's like a giant light bulb shining down on the front of the snowman. It's gonna light up this whole front edge, but the back edge is away from the moonlight, so it's gonna be in shadow. Let's take, if you've still got this brush you were working with, that's a good one to use. We wanna make a pale blue, similar to what's down here. So I'm gonna scrape off a little white, then use the corner of my brush and pick up a little blue. Now the blue is gonna overpower that white right away, so just use a little to start. You can always just gradually make it bluer and bluer as needed. I'm going to paint a little patch on here. That's probably a little too blue than I need, so I'm going to mix a little white back in there. This is probably right. It's a real pale sky blue. There we go. And I'm going to just go along this back snowball and see how I'm kind of curving my brush. This is how you shade a sphere. I remember one of my middle school art classes, we learned how to shade a sphere. That's kind of a hard word to say. And it was a challenge for sure. This brush now I feel is a little bit too big for doing the rest of the snowman. So I'm going to wash it off and set it aside. And I'm going to pick up my brush I trimmed earlier, which is the one I think was number 4, I guess. But just one of these small flat brushes. And I feel like, yeah, I'm going to go up and shade this top part, the middle part. It's the same thing, you just are kind of doing this C shape with your shading. And I'm going to add a little more blue to this in a minute because you can see it's pretty subtle. I could leave it really subtle like that. It would probably feel a little safer, but you know, I'm going to live on the edge a little bit. And I'm going to make it a little darker in a minute. Now the back of the head, a lot of the back of the head gets covered up with the hat. And this top part completely gets covered up, so don't worry about having perfect brush strokes up there. You shouldn't worry about having perfect brush strokes anywhere because it's your painting and it's going to come together in your style. And they're fun to look at years later. So I just mixed a little more blue, and I'm going to come around with this smaller brush now that because at first I was using this big brush. Now I can detail this out a little more. So I just added a slightly darker shade or shadow, kind of mostly along the edge. So as I get here towards the middle, it's just going to fade out into the lighter blue color. This is a little extra credit, I guess. But it really does make it pop out more three-dimensional looking. And the cool thing here is if your shading ever became too harsh, like right here is almost a little harsh, I could wash my brush, go back to pure white, and just use a little bit of paint. You don't need to glob on a bunch. And just kind of glaze over that and soften it up. There, it's like it never was. Now I'll get the top of the head here. Scarf's gonna go across there, so I'm not really gonna worry too much about this neck area. But there, I've got my shaded spheres. And even if you have a really pale line across the backside, that's okay. It can be what's called backlighting, and it looks totally fine. Now, if you feel like you need some more pure white over on this side facing the moon, you can do just that. You can do the opposite of what we did there. So back there we were doing that kind of C shape in the blue. Well, you can do a C shape in the white now, if you feel like you need a little bit thicker coating of paint through here. Looking good. Looking good. Oh, my tree's dry already, so that's great. Because I'm gonna make that tree snowy. Okay. So we've got we don't use much white on the tree. You see how the snow on it's not pure white. There are a few spots that do have some pure white on them. But all I really did was just use less paint on the brush so that you see some of this dark green showing through, because again, it's in the shadow, it's at night, it wouldn't be pure white. So I'm going to use my same brush I was just using. If you have a lot of paint on it, you'll want to wipe it off on your towel. I'm going to start at the top and just dab a little snow on there. And then these guys too. It's like we're dusting it with powdered sugar. All along the tops of the tree boughs. And just keep going and kind of zigzagging across until you have as much snow as you want on your tree. I love this part. You can leave little patches of the dark green showing through, like see how I did right there. Because there are areas where the snow is not going to reach, and you'll look through and see some dark part of the evergreen. If you need to use a smaller brush for this, feel free to do so. But let's bring the snow all the way down to the bottom. And you can have some areas that maybe have a little bit brighter white, especially the top edge, where the snow is really going to collect to the top edge of these tree boughs. It's going to collect on the top edge and then just sort of fall off underneath and leave just a little hint of white on the underside. And if you want to paint decorations on this, you absolutely can. One of my favorite things to do, which we won't do it right now because this white is still wet. But one thing you can do, you can use the handle of one of your small brushes, and you can stamp it in the yellow and just do little yellow polka dots all over, and then it'll look like Christmas tree lights. So that's up to you. If you celebrate Christmas, you want to do a decorated tree, you absolutely can, or you can just leave it like he's just out in the wild somewhere. But there we go. Let's get a shadow going behind both the tree and the snowman. So let's talk about that. Let me move this. So our light source right here, if you think about this, the light's going to be hitting the tree right here, which means the shadow is going to be going this way at this angle. On the snowman, it's going to be hitting right here, which means the shadow is going to be going at this angle. So you see they're both going opposite angles. And we're going to do that. And what color did I make? Okay, so I made this light blue color, but I added just the tiniest little dot of black to turn it more of a grayish blue. I'm going to use my favorite brush here again. That's number 4. Just one of your small flat brushes you can use. Unless you feel better using a smaller brush, you absolutely can. So I've got my white. I'm going to mix a little blue in it. Try to make similar to the snow color. It doesn't have to be exact. It could be a little darker blue. But now adding the black to it is where you want to be careful, because the black will turn it dark real fast. So I just used the corner of my brush and pick up the tiniest little, look at that, tiny little smidgen of black. And when I mix it in, oh, it disappeared. Okay, maybe that was too tiny. But just think about it that way. You're just gradually adding tiny bits. So we're aiming for kind of a blue-gray, smoky blue-gray color. I'm going to paint a little on here to make sure. I think I could go darker. I'll add a little more blue. I was too safe, I guess. A little more blue, a little more black. This should be right. Yeah, that's going to make a nice shadow color. I do feel like I want it more on the blue side than gray, because everything else is pretty blue toned. So I'm just gradually adding more and more blue to this. Now it's getting really dark. So when mixing, again, you always end up with a lot of paint on your brush. Let's go ahead and swipe it off. So it looks like I have no paint on my brush right now, but it's there. So as I go under the tree, you can see it there. It looks like I had no paint on my brush, but there's paint coming off for sure. So you want to go the whole width of the tree across the bottom, because the shadow would be the whole width of the tree. But as you go out and you're kind of jiggling back and forth, we're doing kind of an upside down cone shape. Like the tree is a cone shape, we want to do an upside down cone shape for the shadow, but it's going to be a little trickier because it's also going off to the side. So think of it like a twister tornado. You guys know what those are shaped like, right? That's what I'm drawing. I'm just drawing a twister tornado here. See that? It's twisting right off the edge. Look, there's Toto and Dorothy and all the Wizard of Oz characters. Yeah, so that was pretty easy doing that shadow. The snowman is very similar. It's done, like, I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about the exact roundness of the shadow. It's just on there, so it's very similar in shape. But let's go right about here. So our moonlight's gonna light up right around this area, but right here you're gonna start having some shadow. Let's come under all the way up around like this. So it's kind of like we're just shading this little small patch on the bottom left corner of that snowball. And then you can keep adding more and more. In fact, one of the things I like to do, I like to add a drop of water to my paint when I'm shading stuff, I'm doing shadows. That helps it move more fluidly. And I'm just gonna keep going until I get off the bottom of the star. Now, if I was taking a whole lot of time and doing a hyper-realistic painting, I would really look at the shape of the shadow that I would need to do, but for this, it's just a cute, whimsical winter scene painting, kind of on the illustrative side. I'm not even going to worry about replicating the exact shape that a shadow would be on a snowman. There we go. Awesome. Before we get too far, wash your brush. We don't have a lot left to do. How are we? Okay, we're good. We've got about 15 minutes of work left, and that will give us exactly an hour of working. So time flies when you're having fun. Isn't that crazy? So this moonlight, I guess I need to bring this into the camera. This moonlight is going to cast a bright light down on the snow, just kind of under it. So that's what I want to do. I want to use this brush, pure white. This is the same brush I've been using. Come right at the top edge of this snow and just under your moon. In fact, you could even have some white highlights on this side of the tree if you want to make it even a little more true to how it would be. And you can just drag some highlighting down in the snow. Like, let's say there's a little hill right here. The moonlight is really going to grab the top of that hill. And I'm just letting my brush run out of paint. So for this sort of thing, I like just using remnants of paint here and there. And let's say there's a little hill right here. Yeah, your moon's going to grab the top edge of that. But then underneath, it's going to dissipate. The light's going to dissipate right away. So you can really turn a flat landscape into something much more interesting just by adding highlights. So now it looks like I've got little ridges and hills. And it's so easy to do. It takes a little practice, but it's so easy to do once you start figuring it out. All right, let's decorate our snowman. I think first things first, let's get the hat on there because that will help us position where we put the nose. Let's have a look at our hat. Now there are lots of different hats you could do. You could do like a gnome pointed hat, maybe one that kind of curls under. That would be cute, like here, this style. Let's say you wanted to do something like this. See, here's our snowman head. You can totally do that. Did that show up good? Okay. That wasn't necessarily the greatest rendition of mine, but I think I need to draw this snow head first. So here's another hat you could do. You could do just a beanie type of hat. It's just kind of rounded like that. Bring it down to here, fill it in. And then you could do a little white ball on the top if you want. So those are ideas. I'll show you how to do the standard Frosty the Snowman hat though. We want to use one of our little pointy brushes, and I think I'm going to use the one I used earlier. I like the size of it. It was number 5, but it's just a little round pointy brush. You can pinch those bristles into a nice little point too. It's kind of fun to do. Dip the tip of the bristles in black if you're going to do the black hat. And I'm going to, remember earlier how I said we were drawing little hats, little rounded or smile shape? That's what I'm going to do, but it's going to be kind of on the back of the head here. So coming across here, make sure you're leaving this face part kind of open so we have room to put a nose and all that. And now I need to turn this into looking like a hat. So the brim of the hat, which is this part, the part that sits on your head, it's going to extend out just a bit on either side. And then I'm going to go straight up and connect these. So you've got this parallel, this line with this line. So you've got this funny rectangular shape. Now this, because we're going at an angle, it can be a little bit of an extra challenge to think about and get right. And it's partly because we're adding the curve on there. But as long as you just do a rectangle shape that's kind of angled across the back of the head, it doesn't have to curve as dramatically as mine did. That's all. And your snowman, top of his head can be poking out there. It's going to get covered up. That's all we're looking for. It's just a rectangular shape. And I need to clean up the edge there. And now the hat part is going to go off kind of at an angle. So you want it to be about the width. Like if you make it too narrow, it doesn't look quite right. So I try to line it up with the width of the face. So it would come up here and then up here. And you can make it as tall as you want. You can go off the top of the star if you want. But there we go. I kind of slightly rounded this. And then you can fill it in. I will say a beanie or a little gnome hat, Santa hat is going to be easier, I think. Just because we've got funky curves going on in here. But you can always just reshape things. Once you get it filled in, you can really get a feel for, oh, does this part need to be wider or taller? Or if you need to clean up the hat, you can always mix this blue and kind of edit it from the outside working in. But you want that black to be completely dry before you try and do that. All right, it turned out okay. Nice big hat. Very big compared to this one. This looks like a little pilgrim hat. That's funny. This is a big grand hat. My snowman is getting more and more grand. Okay, so let's get that carrot nose put on there. And then we'll do the scarf and the hands, and then we'll go back and decorate the hat. We'll do the stars in the background, and we will be done. Okay, so for your carrot orange, it's way more yellow than red. So let's scrape off a little yellow. I'm just using one of my small pointy brushes. Now grab just the tiniest little dot of red. You see how that red really pollutes that yellow right away? And get a color that you like for the carrot nose. This isn't the exact shade of carrots. Carrots seem like they're a lot brighter orange, but this'll do. And this brush maybe is a little too big for drawing such a tiny triangle. So I'm gonna go to a different one. This one, I guess it has a number 1. It must be the smallest one, unless there's a 0. And I didn't even dip it in the water. I can use that stiff coating on there to keep that shape. And I like to point the triangle nose towards the moon, so right at the top under the hat. And that way it really looks like your snowman is looking up at the moon. And it's just going to come right back down and join the face here. And you may end up later on putting a second coat of this color on there, because this first coat you can see a little bit of the blue background through, and because of the yellow in the color it makes it look almost kind of greenish. So it's a greenish carrot. Really fresh carrot. So I'll just let that dry and then plan on coming back later and putting another coat of paint on. And how about, let's get the eyes and mouth on. So we really only have one eye and half of the mouth because we are seeing him in profile. So black paint, just on a little bit on the tip of the bristles of one of your small brushes. And you can draw an eye up here, kind of a little tiny bit above the carrot, or at least in line with the carrot. That's cute. Now you can draw a mouth or you can leave it without a mouth. I think when they're kind of expressionless like this, it's cute too. But just under the carrot, I'm just gonna do a row of tiny little dots. Here we go. So his mouth is right close to the eye on mine. Yours might be further apart. It doesn't matter. It just changes the style of the face a little, and it's not a big deal. Fun. It's looking cute. While you're finishing that up, let's think about scarf colors. So I did red just because we hadn't used a lot of red on, we hadn't used really any red other than the carrot nose on this painting, and red really is striking and stands out against all the cool colors. So red is a warm color. The rest of this is all pretty much cool colors except for the carrot. So red is a good choice to use, but you could make pink by mixing red and white. You could make a coral color by mixing red and white and then throwing a little yellow in there. You could do a black scarf, you could do a dark blue scarf, you could do a dark green scarf by mixing blue and yellow. So just think about the possibilities, and just know that you can also do decorations on the scarf. So you don't have to do one solid color. It can be like white and red striped if you want. Candy cane scarf. All right, I want to use a small brush. Which one do I want to use? Oh, it's in the water, I think. Is that the one I want to use? No, that one's a little too big. Just one of your small pointy ones. This one's kind of between flat and pointy. It is the number 2. And I'll pick up the red paint. You guys do any color you want. But what we want to do is we want to have this line kind of curve. So it's not going to go straight across. It's going to slightly curve with the roundness of the head. Got a little red necklace on. And now we want to take it out into the background. So it's going to round out into the background on either side. At first, I'm drawing just the top part of the scarf, so not the tails. In fact, I'm going to add a tiny bit of white to this, so it shows up a little better on the sides here. So it's like we're drawing a turtleneck, just a floating turtleneck on our snow dude here. Depending on how dark your color is, you might need a second coat of paint because you'll be able to see through and see the snowman. You'll be able to see the snowballs and the background color through. So keep that in mind that you might have to do a second coat. I like to sort of suggest that maybe there's a little breeze. So it might be blowing these scarf tails back, and one can be longer than the other, but they need to be about the same width as this. If you think about it, it's just one long snake of fabric, so they don't actually taper off. They're going to be the same width. There we go. A little fancy wind blow to it. But see what I mean now? Like this is the same width across as this, or similar. It doesn't have to be exact. Just we want it to look like it's all part of the same piece of fabric. And then I'll make a little shorter guy here. Again, it needs to be about the same width as this is. This one's all tied up. And you know, if you ever like lace your shoes and you end up with one that's way long and the one side's way long and the other one's way short. It's the same with scarves. One part wraps all the way around your neck and the other part's just kind of left hanging long. Okay, we're almost done. I want to paint, while that's drying, I want to get a second coat on my carrot nose. I've got the fresh orange paint here, so you want to do that right away before that orange dries on your palette. Or you'll mix more, which it's not a big deal, but it is kind of nice to have the exact same color already mixed. And stick hands. They're optional. You could put mittens on the bottoms of them if you want. I just did like a simple line with 3 little twigs, and then this one over here is obviously a much shorter arm because we're not seeing the shoulder part, which is on the other side of the snowman. Let's pick a small brush. I guess this is my time for my number 2 again. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of water to some black, just a tiny bit. I just want to thin it out just a bit. And I'll start right here, right about where the shoulder would be, and I'm gonna go out towards the moon. You can even do a little bend if you want, but keep it thin so you're not gonna push very hard. And then you can just do little fingers. He's got short T-Rex arms, apparently. And keep in mind, this is a stick, so it can be completely wobbly. There may be a little thorns and things coming off of it, so try not to make it too perfect. And on the other side, we're just gonna do another little piece of stick and the fingers. So I'll leave the decorating of the hat and scarf last because you can do that even after the video's over, or you can just stay on with me and do it. But let's do the stars in the background. So I wanted to think of these as snowflakes, but if you know on a clear night with the moon out, you're not usually going to have snowflakes because those come from clouds. So let's get one of your small brushes, and we're going to use the handle end. And so to keep these looking more like stars, I didn't put any over the snowman or over the ground. If you want them to be snowflakes, you can put them over the tree, over the snowman, over the ground. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to dip the brush handle in the white and just start stamping little stars all over. And as your brush handle runs out of paint, they get smaller and smaller, which is nice because we know that if you look at stars, they're different sizes. Some are really big, some are planets. Jupiter's been out for quite a while and it's really big. And then Mars is very small. Mars has also been out in the night sky. And it's kind of reddish, which is super cool that you can see it with your naked eye. You can see it kind of reddish in color because we know Mars is often called the rust planet because it is very red. It's just wild that it's so far away and you can still see that red color slightly. There's nothing wrong with turning these into snowflakes if you really like the idea of that. You can just say, you know, maybe there's some really thin, wispy snow clouds way up above. Plus, it's a painting. It doesn't have to fall to the rules of the universe. Break the rules. You can make it be snowy and clear out. There we go. That's probably about all I'll do. I usually load it up pretty good. Now I'm going to decorate my hat. So I'm going to actually use yellow. You can make green. On the original I did green. It just kind of dried and disappeared. So yellow and blue make green, but I'm just going to do yellow. A little ribbon across the hat. Let that dry, give it a second coat if needed. And now for the scarf, let's see. I'm going to make a really light pink. So my scarf ended up being kind of a, not quite red, not quite pink. It's kind of a raspberry color. And I'm just gonna do pink stripes. So I'll start with the top part and go all the way across. If you think about it, it's wrapped around and it goes over the top of these. Maybe. Actually, this could probably come over the top. I probably did that wrong, but it's okay. There's no rules. Yeah, because one of these probably drapes over the top, so technically there'd be horizontal stripes there, but I'm not going to worry about it. It looks like a scarf to me. And that's it. You can keep decorating. You can add, remember I talked about doing the little lights on the tree. This is what that looks like. Just yellow. That's cute. If you want to do that, totally up to you. And yeah, any additions that you want to add just adds to your creativity, and hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. I did. I actually really like the new one a lot. It's got a nice big snowman, and I like the lights on the tree, and I like the way the scarf is decorated. So hopefully you guys had fun. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and now you have a lifelong decoration to put up wherever you want. And remember that in 2022, you made a really cool snowman. So I'll talk to you guys later, and we'll see you for the next video. Bye.